because they don't have maybe a lot of education, etc. And so so what I'm asking is, are the texts such that, if you're, for example, a farmer, then you can interpret it one way, maybe a more devotional way, and that would be an appropriate practice for you. Whereas if you are an erudite scholar or Brahmin or whatever, then you would be understanding it at a much more complex, internally psychological way, the way you're interpreting. Is that?
Yeah. The thing is that I think there's a fundamental difference between the Vedic texts and the Buddhist texts. Because the Vedic texts were not written with an intention. Because there was no mind involved. It was not compositions for a particular class or for something like that. It was just what was revealed to them. They went there, they searched, they had this inner quest, and it was there. That was the knowledge that they received. And that's why they are mantric. In the sense that you can't play around with the sounds, you can't play around with the words. They are revealed, and the beauty of a mantra is again that if you could calm your mind and actually go back, reproduce those sounds, or with a very silent mind, read the mantras, you can get back that particular experience that the Rishi had. That's the power of a mantra, and that's why the Rigveda and all the Vedas have their potential of, again, making you re-experience what the Rishi saw. But with the Buddhist texts, the later texts, they are more of a mental nature, let's say. So they were compositions with a particular end in mind, right? And so therefore they composed it. But what you also asked, another important point is that, was this esoteric sense purposely put in there, or was it there? Was it by chance? I mean, was it natural of them? So what I understand from this is that any truth is not necessarily digestible by everybody. Because the knowledge that is there, the spiritual knowledge which is available in the Vedas, can actually be very dangerous knowledge because it deals with occult forces. So in order to use that knowledge in a worthy manner, one had to have had a certain kind of self-purification. And only such a person was initiated into that knowledge. So a Brahmin at that time was never one who was born in the Brahmin family. A Brahmin, the word Brahmin comes from the word Brahma, or the word of the word of truth. So it was irrespective of which family you were born into. If you had that inner qualification, the Veda was given to you. And you would not misunderstand it because you know what the Vedas are talking about. But for the later, or those who are not of that inner caliber, if you gave it to them, it was actually what they believed is as dangerous as giving, or it's more dangerous than if you gave a child an atom bomb. Because you don't know how to handle it, it can be disastrous for you, it can be disastrous for everybody around you. So the Vedic knowledge was very potent knowledge actually. And that's why it was revealed only to the initiate. But because of, again, the language, Sanskrit, which can be understood in a literal sense, it's not that these other interpretations are invalid. Because just by performing these rituals, you do get certain experiences. So they are not invalid. But the main question that one asks is whether that is what the Vedas were talking about. Is that the core truth of the Vedas? And that's where the symbolic sense can take one on this deeper spiritual journey. Thank you.
Any follow-up question from the audience about that?
Actually, I like
to tell.
I like to do an analogy actually. Like, for example, when I was teaching, say, for example, mathematics in Illinois, it is not meant for all students. There will be lots of strangers. Same book is written by Professor Steer. The book of mathematics, algebra, for example, is not written to discriminate against anybody. It is there for everybody to take. Everybody can get an A if they understand it. But in my reading, in my general observation, there will go like 10 or 15% of other students, or my students, will get an A, for example. That the book was not written for them, but those 15% students chose to study, they got an A. About half the students, or 25% of the students, got an F. The book itself was not discriminatory. It is up to the people how much effort they put in. Same as Veda. Whoever, regardless of if they come from a rich background or poor background, whoever puts an effort gains the knowledge, few percentage. I taught even here, San Jose State, at times on the subject. So same observation. The books are not meant to written for this or that or to discriminate. As you mentioned, you use the word that was it written so only the Brahmins will understand. No, it's meant for anyone to take. Anyone, even the beings like those who are the tribal people. If they gain the knowledge with their capability, they become knowledgeable. So
if I may just say, like the word Brahmin, it's a fantastic analogy that you gave, a very practical analogy. But just the word Brahmin, I mean, one can say that it's not only for the Brahmin, because who is the Brahmin is a big question that was asked. So
yeah.
that was, yeah. So you define the Brahmin differently, and it's irrespective of your birth status. Yeah.
I just want to comment or highlight one. We had the great honor of having some written text about the talk, so I had a chance to prepare. But there was one sentence here that you wrote in talking about the second image, which is that of the yajna, or the sacrifice, and I was very taken by that. Because there can be many different responses psychologically to the idea of sacrifice. In one way, what am I giving up? What am I losing? Ugh, which is kind of a self-centered point of view. And what you highlight in the text and also in the talk and coming from the Vedas itself, sacrifice is an act of creation. Each time it is performed, it recreates the performer, the agent, as well as the cosmos. So I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think it's also very profound. It also can be, as you pointed out, very scary. Because this is a very potent way of saying each of us is highly responsible for the actions that we take and the sacrifice that we engage in. So when you talk about truth of action, or acting the right, I'm thinking immediately of certain forms of psychotherapy that are currently practiced that are very much influenced by Eastern ideas like acceptance and commitment therapy, where they talk about act according to your values. So here you say that one really accrues based on what you're willing to sacrifice. And obviously lower down you talk about self-immolation, actually offering yourself, so much so that you no longer have that concrete, stuck, small self. And so that's what, one way I see this is kind of like the crux of the practice. But to get to the level of being able to see sacrifice as freedom, as opposed to material loss or loss of my sense of self, which can either be a source of freedom or can be, for most people, it's a source of fear, at least here in the West. So this is.
But doesn't, I mean, if I may just, this fear that you're talking is typically a funny action. It's typically them who don't want to perform a sacrifice, and their ultimate goal is only their growth, or because interestingly enough, in the Vedas they describe these panis as Gomati or Ashwavati, as if they have the cows, they have the knowledge, I mean they have the force, but they don't perform the sacrifice. And if you don't give, if you don't perform it, you will not get. You're all the time busy saving, busy getting for yourself. So it's interesting, the difference what you said, no?
Yeah, I mean, from a Western, I'm thinking because I also lived in India for 6-7 years, so I have some little taste of what that feels like to not be in the Western road. I'm from New York City, a very self-centered part of the world, but a beautiful part. Whereas, this notion of what it really means to sacrifice and to offer, and having a teacher, guru, as an example of somebody who can demonstrate, manifest that, like a living rishi, because here it's very hard to really conceive of what it means to let go of certain things that we think are fundamental to my sense of self. In psychotherapy, where people are stuck according to the dashrus and the ranis and the people who are trafficking and obscure, trying to help people let go of little pieces of the self is usually the goal, not the ultimate sacrifice that the Vedas are really talking about. So that's why I really think about many, many steps and having to have somebody who can guide and say, oh, you're going this way, that's not right, or this way, that's not right. That's why I'm still not sure that really just reading the text or doing the mantras alone would be sufficient, because you really, see, that's a different tradition. I mean,
it won't be sufficient. Definitely won't be the only thing. Like you can't be chanting the mantras and do something completely different in your life. But this is again from somebody's experience who said that if you do the chanting of the mantras very sincerely, it will prevent you from doing things which go against the spirit of the Vedas.